thanks, Acuity, for inviting me. I may run the risk of sounding like a broken record, but I think that would only emphasize the importance of the statements that I'm going to make. I think it's a rarity that a lot of speakers agree on the issues, but at least it's something to take note of. Let me just take a first step back and start on a personal note. When I started in my first job as a lawyer many years ago, one of the first tasks that I was given to do by the partner was to go find the Euribor date of a certain date in the past, because he needed it for a settlement agreement, he needed some interest rate determined, and I just nodded, went back to my room, sat there. As my roommate, you know, I was very much challenged in the fields of economics and anything to do with that. What on earth is Euribor? So he then explained to me, Euribor is this and this, you can find it, it's published. So I did just that. I found the Euribor rate, gave it to the partner, never gave it a second thought. I never, not once, challenged it, tried to figure out why it was that rate, how it was compiled. I just trusted the fact that it was out there, it was published, and that, you know, the partner needed to use it. How odd that I did that. Luckily for me, everybody else did that, but that turned out to be kind of a mistake, and that's why we're all here now talking about a regulation that's supposed to regulate this industry that hasn't been regulated before. Nowadays I work for Euronext. Euronext is a group of market operators operating regulated markets, MTFs, and we also create indices. I think it's not a surprise if I say that our indices are based on regulated data. At least that's what we believe to be true, and that's what we've always advocated, told everybody. Reading the level 1 text, not so sure. When we saw the proposal being published in 2013, I think, we very much supported the proposals because we believe that benchmarks should be public, the methodology should be public, and we believe you should be transparent about it. We've been very supportive of that. What we have said is that there needs to be a proportional approach for the types of benchmarks. If you have a benchmark based on regulated data, that's a different type of benchmark compared to a Euribor or a LIBOR. That has been acknowledged in level 1, so we're very happy with that. Unfortunately, we're still confused. And I've heard it. I've heard the other speakers say the same things. We're confused on what is regulated data. It goes without saying that our benchmarks are based on regulated data. They're based on our own data. They're based on regulated data from other venues. And still, I cannot say for 100% that we only have to comply with that part of the regulation. And that brings me to a couple of points. And, you know, it shouldn't be a surprise for the co-legislators because we've been saying this ever since September 2013. The definition of regulated data was drafted with a clear intention to provide for that proportionate framework, but they wanted to prevent loopholes, at least so I understand it from the co-legislators. We want that proportional regime, but we don't want anybody to abuse it. I get that, totally understand it. But now we're left with a definition that actually puts certain regulated data indices possibly out of scope, or not, I'm not sure. I don't know which regulated data is based entirely and directly on transaction data from regulated trading venues, which brings me to the point of outsourcing. Do we need to go into the outsourcing bit? Do we need to figure out if the data we get from data vendors is being outsourced by us? We purchase data from data vendors. Do we not get it entirely and directly from another trading venue? It's raw data. It's unchanged. We use it. Why is that outsourcing? Do we need that? It doesn't make sense from where we stand. We feel it should fit the definition of entirely and directly. Nothing has changed. We use it. That's where the change starts, and that's why we're being regulated. The same goes for the definition of input data, and I haven't heard anybody say anything about that, so I may be overcomplicating things, so my apologies for that. We don't know where input data ends and where methodology begins. If anybody can tell me, then by all means do so, but for instance, we have a regulated data benchmark. If we were to use that data from another currency, we would use a currency converter, obviously, because we want to have a clear data based on one currency. Is using that currency converter part of the methodology, or is it part of input data? And what if that currency converter is part of the input data? Does it mean that it no longer fits the definition of regulated data because it's no longer entirely regulated data? I don't know. I don't know. It's, where are we? February almost, 2017. So in less than a year, this regulation kicks in, which brings me to the next point, and I'm sorry to have to repeat it. We don't know when we have to comply. The transitional provision says if you're an existing benchmark provider, if you're an administrator providing existing benchmarks, you can benefit from a transitional arrangement. Well, we are. We've been providing indices for over 30 years, but we're also a business that keeps on innovating. So we have continued to innovate and created new indices after June 2016. So where does that leave us? On the one hand, I've heard opinions, and some opinions saying it's differentiated because the old benchmarks, old before June 30th, 2016, can benefit from the transitional provisions, and the new benchmarks cannot. On the other hand, I read in ESMA's consultation paper that the registration requirements are at the level of the administrator. So how can you differentiate between old and new benchmarks if it's a one-off registration process? That's not possible. So does that mean that we have to comply as of January 2018? I would dare to say that pretty much every benchmark administrator would then have to start complying in 2018 because any responsible business innovates. That leaves transitional provisions void. So why was it included in level 1 then? I don't understand. I'm confused. So it's not a reassuring message from our part. But I would like to conclude that we've been supportive of this regulation. We still support the regulation. We want to comply. We want to be able to become a registered benchmark administrator. We'd like just someone to tell us how